Hello and welcome to Unit 3 of our Open SAP course about SAP DataSphere. My name is Klaus-Peter Sauer and I work as a Senior Director in Product Management for SAP DataSphere. In this unit, you will learn how to connect to a remote source and also how to add a time dimension. So in Unit 2, you created your first data model and a simple story. In the meantime, your IT colleague has set up the system connection to the backend system. So you don't need to start from scratch. You can simply replace your local table with a remote table, and I'll show you how to do that. After the quick success with your first story, you notice that the data is summed up over multiple years. If you simply add the date field, it will show the data for each day with booked values. What you really want to achieve is a more generic time dimension so that the users can view the data on a yearly, monthly or quarterly levels, and this unit will show you how to achieve that. So replacing a source table or view with another one is a very useful function, especially in cases where you start with sample data first to get your model, your calculations right before you use the actual production data. But let me show you that in the system first, how you actually do that. So let's go to the system connections and check if the HANA connection provided by IT is actually working by using the validate button here. So this now checks if the different connection options are there, and the toaster message on the bottom just showed us, okay, this connection is ready for all three different data integration options. Now move back to the data builder and go to our existing view. So now clicking on the view, the system is doing some simple checks and checking if the underlying structures have changed or were updated by someone else. That has not happened here, so we directly have everything ready. So instead of the repository tab, we now move to the source tab where we find the different source system connections we have in this space, and we see the HANA connection, which we just checked in the connections overview. And now we need to drill down to our area for the demo where we find the different tables we have accessible in that remote system. So we basically take now the sales orders, drag them onto the canvas, and you now see three options to the right: union, join or replace. In our case, we want to replace the flat file with this remote source. So we just hit it here on the replace button. We click on import and deploy. So same process here, that the table is actually finally deployed on the database. It asks us about the mapping. Since the structures of both of these tables are identical, we can simply hit the replace button, and now this remote table is actually deployed. So for the view, also no change here. We can simply just deploy the simple update we had, and then we're good to go and we could refresh our report. So now let's have a look on the connections in general. The system offers many options for system connections. We have just used a SAP HANA connections in our example. In the connections area, you can set up new connections, edit, delete and validate existing connections. You can also pause and restart connections which are used for real-time replications. You can also use the open connectors and connect to supported third-party data sources. So here you see the currently supported connection tiles. You see that we offer a lot of SAP sources, but also generic connectors to databases, specific hyperscaler systems, cloud storages, partner solutions, and more. So replacing the local table with a remote table means that we virtually access data which is not persisted in SAP DataSphere. This is called virtual access or data federation. So virtual tables behave similar to local tables, but the data is only accessed if you query on the dataset like a preview or in your SAP Analytics Cloud story. The data is transferred through the network each time a query is executed. So this also affects the source system where the data is pulled on every access. That is why the data transfer can be restricted using central filters and selected columns only. So in addition, you can switch seamlessly between remote access and data replication or snapshots without the need to actually change your data model. You can partition these data loads and schedule the snapshots regularly. As mentioned before, the real-time replication can be paused and resumed, and of course stopped or cancelled. So going into the space management, as I showed you earlier, there is an area about connections, and if we click on that button here, we get to the same place where we just been earlier with directly using the menu entry to check if our HANA connection is valid. So looking at the screen, I can create also new connections, and on each of those tiles you always find an information icon which shows us what kind of data integration options are supported with this particular connection tile. So let's have a look at the HANA connection. This supports data flows, remote tables, and replication flows. And if we want to create a new one to set a new connection up, we have basically the option to select if it's a HANA Cloud or a premise-based system, depending on what kind of source system it is. I need to give different connection details. Usually it's host and port name, user credentials, and then if I have, in this case, an on-prem system, I need a middleware component to pick from, so DP agent or cloud connector. And if I pick DP agent, I have to pick one, and then all of these different connection options are actually possible. I don't want to create a new one since IT has already done that for us. So just to show you how simple it is, if of course you have the connection details to those source systems to set up a new connection, and there are different ones which you can pick from. So we exchanged the local table with a remote table earlier. You can also refresh your story in SAP Analytics Cloud and see that it still works and now shows the data based on the remote connection. The story shows the data for all years, but you only want to show it for the split in the different years. So as mentioned in the introduction, simply adding the date field to the graphic would not do the job, as it would show all dates where you have booked values. So this is where the time dimension now comes in. Let me also show you that in the system how to set up the time dimension and how to use it in your data model. So let's go into the space management again and navigate down to the time data area. Let's create these timetables, and you can select from which year to which year you want to create it. So let's use year 2000 until 2050. Hit the create button, and now the actual timetables are generated for you. So from those year values, you can pick whatever is fitting your needs here. And now the timetable is created. If we go to the data builder, we actually see a lot of more tables and views being created for you, which you can now use in your different data models. So let's open our sales order view. Again, system is checking if there are any changes. And on the right hand side in the properties pane, we scroll down to the association area. We pick association. Now all the possible objects for associations are being shown here. Let's limit this to dimensions, and we see, okay, I could associate the day, month, quarter, or year dimension. Let's use the day. So we have the most granular way. Now we get an error message thrown because we have an association, but there's no mapping between the different tables. So that's what we need to do here. So we basically take the created add date, drag it to the date field so that we have created a join criteria between the two. And that's it. Let's move back. Deploy the table, or the view, sorry. And on top here on the right hand side, you can always check if what kind of status your view has. At the moment it's not deployed. Now the deployment process is done, shown by the little toaster message, shown by the deployed status here, and also you can look it up in the notifications area that a few seconds ago now this table was successfully deployed. So now we updated the model, but we need to check also on the report where we want to change and use the time dimension. So let's move over to SAP Analytics Cloud, where we open our first simple story we have created. We want to edit the story. Select our chart here. And now we can simply add a time dimension, the created add date, which we used. You also see that there's a little hierarchy icon, which means the time hierarchy is already active. So let's select it. And select here on the hierarchy level 2, which gives us the year. And since the horizontal view is not so nice, let's use the vertical view and move around the date and the sales organization. So now we have everything grouped by year and sales organization, and we can save our story. And we have achieved our requirement. So the time dimension in general provides a common setup of time data for your space. So you don't need to create time data for each and every data model that you are building. You can use it in multiple models, use the predefined hierarchies, and also SAP Analytics Cloud understands these to drill down into the time dimension. Associations, which we also used with the time dimension here, is also a powerful feature of SAP DataSphere. You can create them in various places like the view editor, which we just used, but also in the table or the entity relationship editor. An association basically creates a join, which is only executed at runtime, so when the association is actually queried. You can associate tables, views from dimensions, texts, hierarchies, and others. So if we look at this unit, what we have learned is about the connections and remote tables. I showed you how to replace a local table with a remote table while your report and the model stays stable. You also learned about the time dimension and how you can use it in your models. And last but not least, you also learned about the concept of associations and how to use them in your data models. So that's it for Unit 3. So thank you and good luck with the quiz.